we move forward. But as promised, before we get to the awards, my personal favorite part, we're going to have two inspiring keynotes, a keynote and a fireside chat, to be precise, on AI and open source. So without further ado, I'd like to ask you to join me in welcoming Brooke Wenig. She's Director of Machine Learning Practice at Databricks. Please come on stage, Brooke. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Gab. Today, I'm going to talk about the future of AI and truly how openness and generative AI can drive financial transformation. And you will see how the llama is relevant later. So generative AI is transforming finance. All of these use cases you see presented up on the side here would not be possible without generative AI. For example, summarizing market intelligence. There is more data out there than any human can possibly ingest. Extracting out ESG strategies and initiatives. Having a search engine for policies and regulations. But the key behind generative AI is it starts with the underlying data. And so on this diagram, you can see that data-forward enterprises, every decision is driven and supported by insights and AI. To contrast, on the left-hand side, you can see data-siloed organizations. Not only is the data siloed, but the organizations are also siloed. And so the best way, in our opinion, to combat this is to build a lakehouse. Raise your hand if you're currently working off of a lakehouse architecture. Woo! The lakehouse combines the best of data warehouses and data lakes, breaking down both silos in data and silos in organizations. So for context, data warehouses are amazing when you're working with structured data, SQL workloads, but they lack support for machine learning. Contrast that with data lakes, which are often known as data swamps, because you can just shove anything into them, unstructured data, semi-structured data, et cetera. They're low cost, generally don't have the performance of a data warehouse, and lack the structure of a data warehouse. And so the lakehouse really combines the best of both data warehouses and data lakes. It gives you the scalability and performance of a data warehouse with the cost of a data lake. And it does this by keeping track of your metadata on top of underlying Parquet files. So this way, you have one source of truth for your data for all of your different business applications. And so at Databricks, we had open sourced the Delta Lake project, which was the first lakehouse out there. But there are plenty of other ones. There's Hootie, there's Iceberg. And with Delta Lake 3.0, it doesn't matter which lakehouse technology you want to use from the open source stack. With Delta Lake 3.0, there's a new capability called universal format, also known as uniform, to really make it even simpler to have that single source of truth. So with uniform, you can see here, with all three lakehouse options, they all use Parquet as the underlying file format, but they have different ways of storing the metadata. And so uniform breaks that down. So if you're using Delta Lake, it actually supports both Hootie and Iceberg as a universal format. And what that means is you're not locked into just a connector ecosystem for just one of these projects. You can now use the entire array of connectors. So Delta Lake is truly breaking down the barriers in data silos, enabling you to have a single source of truth for all of your applications. So now that you have your data in place, you might be asking, all right, I want to start my own generative AI modeling. Why should you build your own? Why should you not use a proprietary one, or why should you not use an out-of-the-box one? The key insight is that data is your IP. Use it to your competitive advantage. And these are 4 key tenets that we often see customers care about. Privacy. Notably, there are many proprietary applications out there that are blocked due to privacy reasons. Quality and cost, as well as latency. And so we'll talk about these in a second when we talk about choosing your generative AI model. And so we believe that the world is shifting to open source LLMs. We already rely on open source for so much of our technology stack. We're all using Python for machine learning development, et cetera. Why should these models also not be open source? And so because I just moved to Canada, got Drake up here. So shying away from one giant ML model for every use case owned by one company to millions of models for specific use cases owned by many companies. This is the general trend that we're seeing. So many of you might be asking, like, hey, I really want to use this really large model. It's a 70 billion parameter. I don't have GPUs for that. The answer to that is you can train lots of very application-specific models that are much smaller and can actually outperform these more generic, larger models. And so this is the trend that we're seeing. You own that underlying model. It's fine-tuned on your data set. It's much cheaper, much faster to serve, and can also outperform these much larger generic models. Of course, you can't expect it to perform well on every task, but you can expect it to perform well on that task it was trained on. Furthermore, the quality of open source models is rapidly advancing, while the cost of fine-tuning is rapidly decreasing. So March 24th of this year, Databricks released the first commercially licensed ChatGPT-like. I say ChatGPT-like because it's an instruction-following large language model that was permitted for commercial use. Prior to March 24th, all of these models were restricted to just research applications. But since Databricks had released Dolly, there's been a plethora of other commercially licensed LLMs. Many of you are familiar with Llama 2. This is the llama from that first slide. This technically doesn't fit the definition of open source, because if your organization has more than 700 million monthly active users, Google and TikTok, or ByteDance, you can't use it. But otherwise, for everybody in this room, Llama 2 is commercially licensed. Then there is Mistral, which according to benchmarks outperforms it. And tomorrow there's going to be another open source model that blows all of these out of the water. And so the key thing is that the best model today is not going to be the best model tomorrow. You need to be able to iterate and adapt to it. And luckily, the cost of fine-tuning these models, so taking it and updating it for your data sets, is rapidly decreasing in cost. And earlier today, somebody had asked me a question of, do we think that the financial industry is going to get together and build our own a financial institute model? So my answer to that is I actually think so. So last year, there was a research model called Bloom, which is a coalition of over 1,000 AI researchers around the world that were responding to having a single player in the LLM space. And they open sourced that model, notably just for research purposes, but it's just truly showing the power of collaboration that goes into building these models and open sourcing them. And in case you're wondering which open source model to use, Databricks actually keeps track of the best performing open source models out there under the Databricks open source guidance page. So you can see here, depending on what your use case may be, and whether you care more about speed for latency purposes, you care more about quality, or a trade-off in between, Databricks helps keep track of these for you. And just to really drive home the point, anybody can fine-tune their own models. So MPT-7B, this was one of the best models when it came out at the time. It cost $200,000 to train from scratch. This is cost prohibitive for many organizations. In this case, it took 10 days. But if you want to fine-tune it to be able to do instruction following, if you want to fine-tune it to do chat, it's $40 to train it to teach it to follow instructions, to be ChatGPT-like, or chat as well. And if you wanted to teach it to write stories, $4,000. So this is something that all organizations can afford to do. And so just really want to make it clear, you don't have to invest in building your own foundation model. That's very expensive. In this case, it only took 10 days to train. Some of them can take 6 months to train. But really showing you all how easy it is and how affordable it is to leverage open source models and update them with your data set. So in summary, AI transformation starts with your data. If you don't have your data in one source of truth, you're not going to be able to build the most powerful applications, the most powerful models leveraging that data. And we love lakehouses. Whichever one you want to use, Delta, Hootie, Iceberg, Delta Uniform supports all three. We also recommend build your own models for competitive advantage. If you're just using out-of-the-box models, you don't have competitive advantage. Anybody can use out-of-the-box models. Think about how you can build and fine-tune your own models with your own data set for competitive advantage. And lastly, open source for the win. This is entirely possible with open source models. Thank you all for your time today.